Welcome to Sultry and Sacred, the art and science of pleasure, intimacy, and self-mastery. The space where passion meets purpose and pleasure becomes power.
Here, we unravel the mysteries of love, sex, and connection, blending soulful wisdom with raw, unapologetic truth.
Let's ignite your desires, awaken your essence, and embrace intimacy as the ultimate alchemy. Get ready to explore what's both sultry and sacred. Hello, good morning. Welcome back to another steamy, thought-provoking episode of Sultry and Sacred. You know us, we love getting into the juicy, sacred, and the messy parts of love, sex, and relationships.
Yes. Today, we're diving into how attachment style, yes, that's the thing that defines your love life, also shapes your sex life. Have you ever wondered why some people crave connection after sex while others just roll over and go through their mobiles? Well, or how you might keep chasing emotionally unavailable partners. I think that sounds very close to some people, but can't quite figure out why. Well, it's all in the wiring, babe.
So today we're going to break down how your attachment style influences desire, intimacy, and even the kind of sex you're drawn to. And because we love little mystery, we each brought four to five surprise questions. Surprise to even both of us. We are not aware of the questions that we've both prepared for one another to challenge each other. Neither of us knows what's coming. So buckle up, because you're going to be surprised as we are, I'm sure.
Yes, and we want you in this too. As you listen, think about which attachment style sounds like you in bed and slide into the comments or DMs to tell us where you land. Let's get into it.
All right, Cinderella, attachment styles. Where should we begin?
Ooh.
I'd like to know how do you see attachment styles? And maybe give us an intro into what they are for those who don't.
From my knowledge of attachment style is how we relate to love, what attracts us to certain partners, how we act when we are in love, whether it's romantic love or any kind of love for that matters. And it's based on a lot of childhood, surprise, and our unhealed wounds with our parents or our caregivers as children. And it affects how we navigate our romantic life, basically. That's in a nutshell without all the geeky, nerdy stuff.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, I think you're absolutely 100% right. When it comes to attachment, and like you said, it's wired in us from the very beginning. You know, how we develop and evolve as children, as babies, how our parents related to us as babies. You know, did they leave us to cry for so long? Did they up straight away? Did they understand the cues that we communicated with them, particularly, you know, at the beginning when we're not able to communicate very well? Our communication is largely in movement and sound and crying and so on. So how regulate, and you know, this is the sad part, how regulated were our parents' nervous systems in order so that we can co-regulate in a healthy way? And that really was for us as older adults dealing with it all, that was the determining factor of how well we are going to navigate relationships in the future. What needs weren't met, and how did we learn to get those needs met or not? You know, it all shaped our nervous system in very deep ways. And the way it shows up in relationships is basically when we are in a relationship, we're basically trying to heal our childhood wounds, trying to meet what wasn't met when we were children. It's our way of nurturing and parenting ourselves, you know, if we really understood the role relationships play in our lives. So, yeah.
So it's fair to say that attachment styles basically weaves into everything that we do, our relationships, how we deal with our own wants and fears to be loved. It's all, again, we're going to talk about how in this sense is we want to be always feel loved or appreciated or validated or seen. What we do in life and in sex in order to make that happen or feel that for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
So, of course, our listeners might be asking, so am I doomed if I have one attachment style because of my childhood? Is it going to be the same all my life with every partner?
Hmm. I love this question. I love this wondering because the answer is no.
Yeah,
It's not fixed.
thank God.
Not fixed. And there's so much you can do in it. And I guess this is the work that we do as relationship therapists. That's what we work on from the very beginning, is first of all helping clients understand why they relate the way they do, what is about their style, what needs are they seeking to be met in the other person, and how are they asking for it. And also, so much also comes up around, is it really what you want? Is it really what you're seeking? Or is it like, it feels like a trapped wire in our nervous system that we're trying to clicking back into place. But with attachment styles, it doesn't. Every relationship that you're in, every person that you're in a relationship with will bring out a different way of relating in you. Some people will be demonstrating for you exactly and mirroring for you exactly where you stand in terms of your attachment style. If you're avoidant, you're going to attract an anxious.
Oh, you're just ruining the surprise now. We wanted we wanted to keep this. Yes,
There is
perfect
more to it.
storms.
It's a lot more complex than that. I wish it was that straightforward. It's not. And what about if you're disorganized, Cinderella? What do you imagine you're going to attract with a disorganized
Chaos.
system?
Chaos. Everyone, everywhere, all the time. And they're going to trigger you the exact opposite of them. So you will be going around from avoidant to anxious and go on and so forth.
Absolutely. And I would argue that, and this is just to demonstrate how not fixed it is, one relationship will make you an avoidant and the other an anxious. Another relationship will make you an anxious and the other one an avoidant. Another relationship will make you disorganized.
I feel like I want to report this part of the episode because it's very close to home. So, it's very close to home. I feel like I need to guard myself now. It is so true. It's so true. And even though I'm in therapy, I'm a therapist. And it's so true. Still, every relationship that comes in shows a different aspect of my attachment. And yes, it's crazy. It's crazy. You think that you are healed, which is a joke to consider ourselves completely healed. But we consider ourselves that, I dealt with this thing, and then someone shows up and ta-da, not so much. Hang on, come back.
It's just a reminder of this is what relationships are for, to show a different side to you that you thought you had already dealt with it, right? You've healed it, you've done the whole shebang around it, okay, in all kinds of modalities. And then suddenly someone shows up like, bing, guess what? Yeah. There's still something energetically there for you to deal with. But it's all good because then you get to observe yourself, in this relationship. And it always goes back to the question, how did I relate to my parents? How did I relate to my father? How did I relate to my mother? Because essentially, when we talk about attachment styles, we're not just talking about romantic relationships. We're talking about how you relate to your male boss. How do you relate to your female boss? How do you relate to your female friends? How do you relate to your masculine friends? And all the spectrum of genders in between. What do these also bring up for you?
Yeah.
Right? How do you react to those based on the very fundamental two pillars, mommy and daddy?
No pressure on them. We're not pressuring them or putting blame on them. They're human beings, but
we're also telling the parents, this is how deep it goes. And I know that every parent out there who has children these days, because we no longer come from families that have endless lines of children, right? So we are very, I'm just going to have one child or two children, and that's a luxury in itself. So you want to raise them the best you can and minimize all the kind of bullshit that you've been through.
True. That's so true. So
anymore.
Let me get this straight. So basically, people start to grow up, move in life, and think about relationships and how they relate to other people. And bam, they discover that there's a wounding of some sort of an attachment. How does that affect their sex life? Because I had read a lot of articles and studies about this, but from our experiences as therapists, how do you think, how does that affect this. You ever encountered in your practice?
Absolutely. The entire clinical textbook on sexology is basically a description of how attachment styles affect you. Because we're talking essentially about anxiety and the different ways it manifests and the different ways it expresses itself. Because whether you're anxious or avoidant, you're dealing with anxiety. If you're disorganized, you're definitely dealing with anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? That's the core thing. And what is anxiety? It's I mean, you would not be doing it justice if you just say it's an overthinking or overworry.
No.
It's not. It's a message for you from your nervous system to say something is not quite right here.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not comfortable. And so when it strikes, it feels so uncomfortable, so debilitating sometimes, to the point where you feel, okay, I have to do something about this. And so, but what comes up then when you do something about it, this is very interesting. And let's talk about it in the bedroom. How does, for example, anxious attachment look like in the bedroom? Right? Can you imagine?
Yes, I can. And usually it's known, so I'm gonna nerd out here. Studies have shown that anxious attached people have a very intense orgasm, more than the avoidant. So
yeah, that's one way it can manifest for sure.
This is from the nerdy side.
This is the nerdy side, yes.
From the therapist side, I can say that they are more into people pleasing. So they will do things even if they don't want to, because they want to feel loved. They want to keep the person around. Even if there is no love, they just want to keep that person around. So they will do whatever it takes to keep them, basically.
Exactly. And you've just touched the wire of what anxiety or anxious attachments and how it plays out in the bedroom. It's the person is largely out of their sexual experience, or their experience of intimacy can feel like, I'm here to please you, therefore I'm allowing sex to happen to me as opposed to happening with me.
Yeah.
And I just want to also say that I'm talking about extreme manifestations of anxiety-driven sex and intimacy. Right? It doesn't always look like that. And sometimes it looks like that without you realizing.
Of course.
You know, it takes some self-inquiry.
Do you think, so I'm going to tap in another element here. Do you believe that girls who grew up with estranged fathers or have quote-unquote daddy's issues would be leaning towards anxious attached or avoidant in bed?
Most likely anxious. Again, depending on the dynamic with the father figure. You know, it's always around the anxiety towards the opposite sex. The anxiety towards the opposite sex and how much of a threat it feels. And that feeling alone dysregulates the nervous system. And it either makes it overwhelmingly anxious or overwhelmingly avoidant. Yeah. Because when you're avoidant, you're avoiding this feeling of overwhelm, or you're trying to avoid the things that will trigger this feeling of overwhelm, like you're not in touch with your own emotions anymore. But it's also a question of, when does this start? When does it get triggered? Does it get triggered just in the thought process, like thinking, okay, I want to have sex? Or is it triggered when you're making out? Is it triggered during sex? Is it triggered after sex? So again, these markers will give you information about what's going on in your nervous system.
Yeah, and I believe also from practice that it showed up a couple of times where, especially women who have anxious attachment style and have a relationship with their father that's not very safe growing up, or the father was an estranged one, in the back of their head, it usually is that I need to outperform and be the best sex partner for my partner in order for them not to leave like my father once left. And this happens in the back of their head. This is not happening consciously. So
no, it's very subconscious. I know a lot of people will be listening thinking, ew, why are we talking about sex and my dad? But I will give Freud credit here that he touched on this. He didn't explain it very well, but he had a good hunch. And I will say that this is actually what it's about. Not, let's not think of it in terms of like sexually attracted to a parent. That's not what we're saying at. Yeah. That's not what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's the blueprint, the energetic blueprint that you have created for yourself. This is the wildest thing. As children, we made decisions and created belief system circuits in our nervous system that we are still living in our 30s and 40s and 50s and sometimes 60s. And that's the crazy part, right? And that's why it's so important to know yourself so deeply and so well, so that you can really identify and discern between what is yours and what's not, what needs healing, what needs to be transmuted.
Yeah. So I think that we talked a bit about anxious attachment style. Let's move on to the big boss, the avoidant.
That you call it the big boss, because that's from an anxiety perspective, or from the anxious perspective.
Yes.
An avoidant might actually say to you that the anxious is the big boss.
Yes.
And that's why they're avoiding it.
Exactly. I think that the avoidant would describe the anxious as too much, too loud, and anxious would describe the avoidant as the big boss. So the energy here is the dynamic itself is different. So
For me, the big boss is definitely disorganized. So unpredictable, you don't know what's going to happen.
I would call people who have this, they are Godzilla. They will go in and we're not sure what's going to come out from the other end.
Exactly. Is this a bad time to be open and vulnerable and say, I have disorganized attachment, or that I have done a lot of work around, by the way?
Yeah, thank you for your vulnerability, and I'll share the same with you and say mainly anxious, and in certain relationships I was definitely avoidant. So it depends on which mirror is coming.
Exactly, right? It really does depend on who is activating what part in you in that time of your life. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Cinderella. It's I feel that when it comes to relationships, that's like the toughest journey. Figuring out, how do I attach? Why do I attach in this way? And how can I heal it?
Yes.
So that it doesn't control me in the relationship, and that I can actually enjoy a truly authentic, intimate experience with my partner without all these scenarios and triggers constantly showing up. So my question to you is, what has been the most effective ways for you to deal with it?
So I believe the first thing is therapy. Therapy was the strongest thing and the most prominent part of understanding what my attachment style is and how it's manifesting in my life, and coming to terms and agreeing and accepting that part, because what do you mean has always popped into my head when I was starting therapy, and this showed up. I believe I saw my anxious attachment style as a little girl part of me, that she's a romantic, she's a lover, and she wants to be loved all the time. She wants to be cherished. So as much as humanly possible, I gave that to her. So it doesn't very much, would she want that from outside? So I tried to give that to her. I tried when she showed that anxiety in any relationship, friendship or otherwise, that I will be kind to her instead of trying to give her like, you shouldn't do that, or you are better than this. For instances, I write a lot, so she manifests her anxiety in poetry or romanticism in poetry, for instance, and I'm very open about it. So now when something actually triggers me, I tell the person that this is not good with my system, and I understand it. Yeah. And that medicine helps as well with connecting a lot of dots for me when it comes to anxiety or my attachment style in that sense. So my relationship with love and with sex have changed drastically afterwards during my ayahuasca ceremonies. So I know that it sounds cliche that people usually say after my ayahuasca things have changed, but it is true. What can I say about it? Because it's true.
It is true. Could be cringe, but it's still true.
Exactly. You can cringe all you want. It's a fact. Like we're not true.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for sharing that. And it's also a nice, you drew out a really beautiful map of how to deal with it, right? And my journey is very similar to yours. I think for me, it's funny because my first ayahuasca journey, my intention was to heal so I can be in a relationship. And this was back in 2019, end of 2019, just before COVID. And what blossomed then afterwards, because that was my intention. So the next years till today has been about cultivating the most beautiful relationship I have with myself that I've in my entire existence.
Yeah.
Relationship to myself and my relationship with my parents, God bless them, and going through this whole process of forgiving, compassion, loving oneself truly, from a place of unconditional love, and therefore, cultivating healthy boundaries, saying no and honoring my no more people pleasing. Yeah. The only person I am here to please is me. Yeah. And that is a massive statement. And it can really be triggering to a lot of people, and make them think, oh, but that's being selfish and that's being this and that. Actually, you can never be in a healthy relationship if you're not self-full. Mm-hmm. You're not full of your love for yourself. No one has a chance in heaven to connect with you out of love. Mm-hmm. And you have a chance in heaven to connect with anyone out of love. Yeah. That's what I found.
That's very beautifully how you put it. So basically it goes back to the inner child, or that part of ourselves that's wounded, and try to make amends with the caregivers that they once were, and see them as humans, not as superheroes that we always thought they would be. And rightly so, we were children, and as children, this is what's expected out of their parents, to be their superheroes, till they can sit down with them and say, I make flaws, I'm full of flaws, and I'm a human being just like you. And before I always go back to, I feel that my anxious attachment as well is linked deeply with abandonment. So they usually come hand in hand when they're triggered from anything in relationship. If a friend, I feel like in my head, my anxiety starts to go off, the alarm starts, oh, there is a panic here, there's something dangerous here, that friend is abandoning us, we are not okay, we are not going to be loved. And this is when I feel like I can imagine myself holding myself and tapping my shoulder, tapping my back, that everything's okay. It's happening. This is the story that you tell yourself. It's not true. And going through the story or the timeline from the other person point of view sometimes give me that kind of, oh, it's only happening to me. And this was one of the tools that helped me going through the attachment style of anxiety in the early stages of understanding the blueprint of it. So it helps
100%. Which brings me to a whole other dimension around attachment, which is, I would argue, is really understanding who we are. And I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about it in very binary terms, like female and masculine. But the same applies to in any way you identify in terms of your gender, because we're talking about energies, masculine and feminine energy, and you identify with it in your way, and it's very unique to every single person. I just wanted to establish this because this is a very LGBTQ friendly podcast.
See the poster behind me?
Yes, exactly. So even if we're just constantly talking about masculine and feminine, man and woman, really ultimately what we're talking about energies. And of course, gender is implied as well in some conversations. However, please take it the way you need to relate to it personally to you. I feel that, and we are living in very interesting times where we need to be constantly testing this reality over and over, because our mythologies are changing. We're entering in a whole new era where we're relating very differently to one another. We identify in a myriad of ways that really challenge the status quo, challenge the heteronormative culture in every possible way you can imagine. And the patriarchal culture, of course, goes without saying. And we are trying to carve out exactly almost like a uniform understanding of what's going on and how we're relating in this new paradigm and so on. And so it's understandable that we're all very confused, and it's affecting our relationships. It's affecting our relationship with ourselves, our sexuality, and the persons we are in relationships with. It's really important to identify for yourself, what it means to be. If you're identifying as feminine, then what does it mean to be in your feminine? And if you're identifying as masculine, then what does it mean to be in your masculine? Understand that these energies are really, it's really more mathematical than you think, more logic and scientific than you think. The feminine is the negative sign and the masculine is the positive sign, not because women are bad in any way, but we're talking about electromagnetic field that is created when masculine and feminine comes together. I'm talking about very electric terms. So, in those very basic terms, it means that the masculine, the positive, is the giver. and the feminine, the negative, is the receiver. So when a woman who wants to be in her feminine, she wants to be in her feminine flow and wants to be treated like the feminine that she sees herself to be, she cannot then engage in actions and behavior that make the man take over the man's impulse, natural impulse of pursuing or giving her all the attention. And, I don't like the word chase. It's more like there is an elegance and beauty to the idea of pursuing the woman you love, not stalking her and making her feel unsafe, of course, but in a very safe container, really making her feel like you are, you want her to, you treat her like a queen and you make sure that she knows it, right? And for the woman to be on the receiving end of that, right? Allow herself to receive, not to get then into an anxious state and start becoming clingy, becoming needy, becoming attached of any kind of way. She's in her lane and she gets on with whatever she's getting on with. Right.
I find that how we speak about it might sound like it's easy, it's mathematical, but it's a very difficult process to not get attached to an outcome or to a relationship or to an expectation or to a dream or it's very difficult not to do that. And I believe that one of the main elements that we need to understand that when it happens, there will be rupture and repair, and that we can survive the rupture by self-repair, and it's okay to be on the other side. I always say to my clients that expectations are future resentments, but that doesn't mean that you don't get to have expectations. It just means that you communicate it. And I feel this is a very powerful energy for the masculine and the feminine to be able to demand what they want and be ready to receive it or be ready to give it or not ready and be honest about it. Because then the chemistry of anxiety and avoidant can be healed or can be repaired in a dynamic of partners or in a dynamic of a relationship.
Yes, exactly. It's a whole journey to get from just acting out, reacting to triggers that you don't understand where they're coming from. And the other side of the spectrum is to be fully and deeply in your essence. And to constantly, and to get there from here to there is a journey of constant self-inspection, reflection.
I love that.
And asking yourself, okay, so why did this trigger me? Why did I abandon myself when we were having sex? And also noticing how the loop that's created between you. There's always a loop. So if you're anxious and they're avoidant, what's the loop here? How it manifests? Because it's never black and white. It's so different. So it shows up so differently to each and every single one of us in different relationships.
So for avoidant in life and in sex, the studies again have shown that they are the most likely to engage in casual sex than in anxious attached people.
Yep.
And usually they use, and I'm going to say the word use not in a bad way, but sex is being used in order to have the emotional element without the attachment that comes with relationships. So sex is there, they feel the love that needs to be felt at the moment, and then they start building the wall or they start detaching themselves or avoiding the whole anxious love, let's cuddle after sex kind of a thing. So they totally avoid it. And this is where the anxious and avoidant become the perfect storm, because then anxious start to feel like they need to give more, they need to be louder, whether negative or positive, because any reaction from the avoidant is a good reaction. So they start going into loop. And once they do that and become louder, the avoidant starts to avoid more and distance themselves more. And keeps on happening.
Yes, exactly. And also, have you noticed how the whole ghosting thing has really, even before we go to the bedroom, just the texting phase, the ghost.
Have you ever been ghosted before?
Plenty.
Have you ever ghosted before?
Have I ever ghosted before? Not unless it got to a point where they're not listening and they refuse to listen. Yeah. So the only response is no response. Yeah. Right? But before that, there are stages of communication and negotiation.
Yeah.
Before that happens. So people who are avoidant will ghost. That's the first marker of someone who's avoidant attached. Right. And it's like you said, it's how it plays out in the bedroom. For example, a lot of women complain about how their man or their partners don't like cuddling up after sex. That's avoidance. And they're so overwhelmed and engulfed, they might not. The difference between avoidant and anxious is how they show the anxiety. And anxious will show it, will communicate it. It will show up somehow. You can see and hear it. With the avoidant, it's like no one's home.
It will be a surprise in the aftermath afterwards.
Exactly. And they will do certain things to remove themselves from you, which will make you more anxious.
Mhm.
But it's their way of dealing with the turmoil that they're going through.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, sometimes it shows up with avoidant, it shows up that some men feel that they cannot orgasm, for example, with their partners. They have to do it solo, through masturbation, in order to achieve orgasm. But during the sex itself, it's difficult for them to experience orgasm during intercourse.
It's
It's
not
too
a
much.
physical thing. It's more on the psychosexual thing.
Exactly. Right. And this is how it shows up.
Mm.
And sex is where everything shows up.
Mm.
Can't escape it. And that's why if you want to have a healthy sex life, work on your relationship to yourself.
Yes.
Work on all these subconscious things that are going on for you that you don't realize are.
Have the difficult conversations. Cry.
Absolutely.
Do whatever you need to do, but have the difficult conversations that usually are avoided and usually manifest in bed afterwards. So how do you feel avoidant women would show up in sex?
Like you said earlier, sex becomes a very casual thing. No particular attachment to what sex means, what the meaning of what we're doing here. Like, don't overthink it. It doesn't mean anything. This is the thing. Every behavior, no matter how meaningless you try and make it in your mind, every behavior has a meaning behind it. That's a fact. Even the most meaningless, mundane things you think you're doing, there's a massive subconscious meaning playing out for you right there. So when you say to me, oh, it just didn't mean anything, I know for a fact that you're not aware of what it means. And that level of unawareness means that it's something so deep that you're either running away from or running towards or avoid. What the word avoidance, what does it actually mean? Sure, on a certain level, a surface level, you're avoiding situations that make you feel anxious.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? What is this fear you're running for your life?
Yeah.
What feels so threatening to you that you're not able to enjoy the most basic pleasures in life?
What are you scared of? That's usually my favorite question whenever I have a conversation with someone and they start by saying, yeah, it's okay, it's not important, or, and then it gets into conversation. Usually I end it with, what are you afraid of? And that would make them, okay, so what am I really afraid of as an anxious person? Or what am I afraid of as an avoidant person? What is it that shakes me to the core, that makes me do things that is against my values or against my yes and no's? And how can I stay honest to myself and to the person I'm with, whether they're casual or not, and be there, be present? What am I running away from that's stopping me from being present? And
yes.
So this brings me to our favorite trend, shame. How do you think shame would manifest for anxious or avoidant? I have an idea about it, but I want to pick your brain before I share my point of view.
Well, it's all laced up in there, isn't it? I mean, how do you even there's it's like sticky cheese or tomatoes on the pizza, you can't separate.
I like more the idea of lace. I saw lace like red and white tangled together, but then it turned to cheese.
Sorry. My metaphors are all over the place for today. But you get the meaning. You get the picture. So with shame, I mean, it's all of it. Really, think about it. This is the thing. When you ask them, what are you scared of? When the deeper you dig, the more you realize there is a massive shame bulk waiting at the bottom of this inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? I find it easier when I reflect on myself. So I'm happy to share vulnerably with what's going on with shame and attachment. So with attachment, there's definitely a shame around, like you said, when we grow up, mom and dad are our superheroes. I would even go as far as calling them God.
Yeah.
Right? You are born into a world where these two gods are looking after you.
Yeah.
Your entire world is defined by them.
I love that idea.
Your survival is defined by them, right? And they create the very matrix that you are going to then move through in life. That's why the way I move in life through the lens of the matrix of my parents is very different to the way you move in life through the matrix of your parents, and so on and so forth. So when I see my parents in that light, or I relate to them in that way subconsciously, I'm creating then decisions about myself in relation to them. So if they, for example, tell me off for being needy or for needing something and crying about it and throwing a tantrum, and they yell at me and shame me for doing that, I've internalized this idea that I am so unworthy, that the gods have demanded that I do not receive this need that I feel so, primitively entitled to. And so when they react in that way, I realize, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm not worthy. And if I don't shrink myself and I don't accept that these needs are not going to be met in the way that I need them to be, then I will be abandoned. I will be lost. I will not know how to feed myself or survive in this world. And that story then it stays intact, but it just changes, it metamorphoses as we go along and meet different people and relate to different identities as we go along. How does that feel for you?
I love that, and I love the idea of God. So when I asked that question about shame and attachment, I feel like shame would manifest for anxious attached as the sense of hollow afterwards, because there was no sort of honoring in sex or in relationships. So usually people would feel like they're hollow, like they did something that was wrong with them. There's this messing up with their system, that they feel hollow, not there. And for avoidant, it would usually feel like guilty, or that they took advantage of someone else or someone's body, basically. I feel this is how attachment or shame would show up in attachment for people that would start working on their journey of healing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is how it is.
Yeah. I will also say, based on my clinical experience, it's really interesting also how to see that shame being projected with couple, because sometimes, especially when one of the couples has been going through therapy and they think that they are healed, right? It's what's called spiritual ego, healing ego. It's like, I'm healed, I've done the work. What have you done? So, and don't realize that something is still going on for them, and they're just projecting it on the other person, who they see as they haven't done the work. They don't go to therapy, etc., etc. So I've seen instances where one partner will project their anxiety onto their partners, and honestly, it's not pretty. The way it actually creates, when you take your anxiety, you dump it on the other person, it creates like a sexual dysfunction in the other person. It's really interesting how that, say interesting because I'm a clinician, but when it happens, it's very unfortunate, because the other person then takes all the blame, and that person with the anxiety just thinks that there's nothing wrong with them and there's no point in them trying to do anything. It's the other person who has to do all the work. Yeah. And usually these people are not ready to listen. They'd rather quit therapy than admit that there is something fundamentally that they need to work through first. And appreciate that the transfer that happens during the intimacy it's not all their partners. It never is. There's always a loop. Like I said, you need to see how the loop plays out between you, how it manifests in each one of you.
Yeah.
That same energy will manifest in both of you.
Yes.
In some way.
And I think that this is the beauty of the human experience, as I always like to say, that it's like a dance, and sometimes it's a new dance. You just need to learn how to move through it. You're not going to get the steps right away. Just need to be attuned to the fact that you're not going to get it correctly, and you have a part in the dance, a 50-50 thing. You do the work, your partner does the work, and continue on doing this. And I just want to raise a point that if you're a single person and you know your attachment style, you need to understand what are your triggers and not try to avoid them as much as try to work through them. Because if you keep repeating doing the triggers over and over without trying to resolve what's happening, the pain is going to be there on neurological level, that the work afterwards will need to be much deeper and more profound than ever. So if someone with attachment style and they engage in casual sex over and over, and they feel hollow, or they need to overcompensate, or they keep on doing that cycle, breaking that cycle wouldn't be easy, because this is how they feel the validation or the love that is needed, because again, this is where it's coming from. Breaking that cycle might need a lot more deeper work than the ones that we mentioned briefly. Would be more
Yes,
consistent.
exactly. And I feel that something that people don't talk about very much, especially in this context of relationships and healing, is that it's really, really, really good for your nervous system to be single, to allow yourself to just be with yourself, to understand yourself on that deep, deep level. And I think there's a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza reels going out at the moment talking about this, about how women who have decided to become single and just to work on themselves and so on, how much that impacted beautifully on their nervous systems and calming it down and regulating how to regulate and be so focused on what's good for them, identifying what's sacred to them, and not engaging in behaviors that can undermine their self-worth and so on. I just think there is so much beauty to be reaped from, and wisdom to be reaped from allowing yourself to stay single, like intentionally single. Not because you can't find someone right now. No, deciding that even if someone brilliant comes along, like, no, I'm in my metamorphosis phase. I'm in my cocoon phase, and I just want to regulate my nervous system so that the next relationship I go into is not going to challenge me the way other relationships have challenged me. I want better problems, basically.
Yes, and I understand myself so much better that when in a relationship something happened, I tap into the self-love that I already have given and I already practice. So it doesn't affect me on a core level where self-abandoning and would happen again and again, or sense of that anxiety that I'm not loved would happen again and again. So yes, being single on purpose is important.
Do you think there is some shame around women choosing to be single?
Yes. Let me share with you an example yesterday. I was in an outing yesterday with a group of strangers that I decided to, okay, so I can go up for an outing and meet people instead of cats. And so when I was there and after the outing, it was a very interesting outing and it was cool. And then guy was like, so how come how come you have problems with relationships? I said, I don't have problems with relationships. He said, yeah, you're single. I said, I don't have problems. I have standards. So
yes,
and he was like, I like that.
Exactly.
Yes, it still is, even though I live in Dubai and it's supposedly being the everything everywhere, Habibi come to Dubai kind of thing, still they see the single women as they must have a problem.
Yes, especially when they're divorcees, especially when they have children from another marriage or relationship. There's always damned if you do and damned if you don't, right? And this is like the most basic shaming that we get as women.
Yeah.
Like, you're not in a relationship, there must be something wrong with you. Add to that also, if you're a relationship therapist and you're not in a relationship,
Oh my God.
do you even know what you're doing?
Exactly.
Yes, I do, especially because I'm in a relationship.
Because I see.
I've been in relationships. That's the whole point. Yeah. But yeah, we need to keep showing where shame keeps dominating the story. And we definitely need to keep releasing it by confronting it and being very honest and open about it and vulnerable.
So I have a sultry question for you.
Oh, yes. Are we going into the questions now?
Yeah.
Good.
Attachment style had a theme song in bed. What would yours be?
Mine. If anxious attachment had a theme song, it would, okay. It's beautiful that you asked me this question right now, because I really feel I'm in the space of there is no way I'm going to be in a bedroom where there is anxiety. I'm so done with it. There is no way it will happen again. So in my head, it's just like butterflies and hearts and rainbows. But what it would look like for me, or how it would feel like for me, is like walking into a space where they're playing heavy metal music.
Ooh.
Like, it's like impossible. I can't. There's no way I could regulate my nervous system to relax in that kind of atmosphere. So that's a very powerful question. Thank you. Am I allowed to ask you back?
Of course.
Because you're the musician. Out of the two of us, you're the one who's really into music.
So my song would be "Is It a Crime" for Sadie. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful song and so powerful and so passionate, and it has a lot of giving and receiving.
I like that. Interesting. Cool. Is it my turn to ask you a question now? Yes. I have questions for you. Actually, I feel that I already asked you the first question. My first question was, how does your attachment style shape the way you experience love, intimacy, and connection? I feel that we've already answered this question, haven't we?
It flows. It flows.
Yeah. So okay. My questions, they don't necessarily need a personal answer, but it's like maybe I can answer it from your experience as a therapist, right? When you feel triggered in relationships, is it the present moment you're reacting to or an old wound resurfacing?
That question is tickling. I feel like it depends on where my mental space at and what the relationship is like, which stage of the relationship is like in that moment. I remember my last relationship. It was always triggering all the time. Not a single day would pass without it that I would be triggered or I would feel something that is off. And it wasn't past. It wasn't past wound at the moment that manifested itself. Of course, after a lot of therapy, it showed up that it was touching on something in the past, but this was overwhelmingly wrong and alarming and triggering, and it allowed it to happen over and over again, thinking that I can fix this, that I am the problem, that I need to work on myself. I am the one that's getting triggered, and it's a problem in me, without always having to reflect on maybe the other person's behavior is really shitty, and I'm a human being, and shitty behavior would definitely affect me. Again, if I'm learning something in the past few years and the universe is repeating the lesson and I'm not learning, literally I'm not learning, is that I need to cut cords from the beginning when things are showing major red flags that are not workable, that are not, the person in front of me is not healing, because it then will trigger me. And as I was mentioning earlier, why put myself out there in front of triggers over and over again? For what? For what's sake? You know, like, so yeah. I think it depends on very circumstantial and very situational, and how the mental state of the person I'm dealing with or me, they are doing it intentional or not. So it comes and goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's really interesting with triggers because well, first of all, we're talking about how attachment styles are based on how we received and gave love with our parents, right? Or how our needs were met with our parents. It's really but also important to understand that when we are triggered, it's not just because the other person has shitty behavior, but that this shitty behavior is manifesting in a certain way to also trigger in us something around self-concept. In that, are you, for example, especially in like abusive situations, that non-negotiable, why are you behaving this way towards me? Where have I accepted in our relationship? Where have I accepted that this is a normal way to talk to me, to respond to me, to behave towards me, to respect me, to love me, and so on? What is my behavior? And this is where our own ownership needs to come in. Ability, like, where in my behavior did I give room for this kind of treatment? And also, so therefore, where am I not loving myself enough and really valuing what I bring to this relationship? And therein is the work. Because like we said, your relationships always mirror something for you.
Yeah.
You can throw stones at the mirror reflection, but you have to at some point go back inside and see where did you relinquish your self-worth?
Yes, we love that. And this is why I said that at the beginning, it might not have been, it's not coming from the past, but then after the dust has settled and we go into the self-reflection and accountability, understand where your role was playing and why did I allow this? And I always love this sentence from that movie, Perks of Being a Wallflower. We accept the love we think we deserve.
Yes. And it cannot come from the hollow place of arrogance. I deserve better. You should treat me better. I'm better than thou, holier than thou. It can't come from that space. No one will believe you. If you don't believe it, then no one's going to believe you.
And
it's not one of those things that you could fake it till you make it.
Yeah. No. It will come off very dishonest, I believe.
It will trigger the other person to treat you even worse.
Yeah, that's true. So that I have a question that's very similar to yours, but so you meet the perfect person, chemistry is fire, but their attachment style triggers the hell out of you. Do you work through it or what?
Oh, I love this question because it's something very important to add also to what you were saying. You cannot be in a if you are someone who's growth oriented and healing oriented, you can't be with someone who's stagnant, who is not going to value growth and learning, who is not going to invest 100% in wanting to create the ultimate life, the best relationship one can enjoy. Because guys, life is short and your life is literally colored by the people you're in relationships with. The quality of your life is about the quality of your relationships. So I'm someone who, for example, I don't have time for crappy relationships anymore. So done. And so if it's not with someone who is going to, first of all, be on the same wavelength in terms of core values around relationships, and also with a growth mindset, like we're not going to give up on the first, when we hit the rocks, we're not going to both just give up and just move on. No, there is commitment, there is devotion, there is regarding this relationship like it's a sacred thing. Because I regard my life as sacred. I regard my life as a divine gift. So understandably, this is how I'm going to deal with and treat everyone in it, including myself. So if it's not someone who, and I don't care how fiery and passionate and sexy and delicious they may be, this like really bottom line, this is what it all comes down to. Are you willing to grow with me or not?
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing. And we all want it, by the way. Don't we all say, I want to be in a relationship to grow old together?
Yeah.
We don't have to grow old together. We can grow into the best versions of ourselves, even when we're 100.
Yeah, that's true.
It just doesn't stop. We just keep going.
So I from what I'm getting is basically it's the discernment, to practice discernment of when to throw in the towel and when to continue is if both parties are willing to be present fully and invest themselves and their hearts and their spirit and their souls within their relationship. And this is when we start talking about, okay, triggers or how we can work with it. But if someone is always pointing the finger that it's your problem that you need to work with, honey, run.
Exactly. The other person really needs to have the tools, right? They need to be able to and willing to self-reflect. They need to also have the tools around how to look after their own nervous system, when I trigger them.
Yes.
Right? Because it's inevitable.
Exactly.
It's not about going into a relationship that's trigger-free. Hell no. It's not going to happen. It doesn't exist.
At all. And this is the best part. Yes, you're going to trigger me and I'm going to trigger you. And then we are on this boat together and we're going to work it out because, again, the sense of safety that both of us want to be in that boat. I'm not holding you hostage and the other way around is not happening. So it's that sense of someone wants to be there, basically, for both.
Exactly. Okay, let me ask you another question. Okay, I'm really interested in this answer from you. How can you shift from attachment-driven love to a state of conscious, sovereign connection? And do you feel ready to step into that?
That's a very loaded question. I feel like the thing that my personal experience went from this state to the other state is falling in love with myself fully, accepting who I am and my flaws and my shadows and all of my shadow parts and embracing them and not thinking of myself holier than holy. That just because I do the work and just because I know my attachment style or I have awareness, then I'm good to go. No, it's being humble and the idea of being human with my flaws and loving them anyway and knowing that I deserve to be loved with my shadows and with my strength and with my light and accepting the other person as well with the same thing, not thinking of them holier than holy or putting them on a pedestal of any sort. Which is very hard when you love someone. Your eyes start showing wings around them. And so bringing them to the human level, not thinking of them as gods like our parents, because again, this is what we do. So bringing them to that idea that we're here to share human experience and we're on the same level of flawed and trying to work around it. And that relationship is a conscious act of receiving and giving. Well, the masculine and feminine is within both of us. And sometimes I'll be the giver and you'll be the receiver and the other way around. And there is nothing wrong for a man to be in his feminine and for me to be in my masculine, in the idea of love and sharing and receiving. Not all the time, and this is where the equations sometimes happen. And the communication, if something is wrong, to always correct it. And I feel like plant medicine helps with that a lot to be in that state of consciousness, of understanding our humanity, to see the world blueprint from a different angle than the love me, choose me kind of a way. But let's love one another, let's cherish one another, let's honor one another. I feel these are two different words. When this is Meredith Grey from Grey's Anatomy, when she stood in front of, I can't remember what was his name, but she told him, choose me, love me. And he didn't eventually, and then he did. But this is attachment versus being present and being, I'm here and I'm offering myself to the world, but I'm very discernment. I'm practicing discernment of who has access to my heart and who doesn't. And believing in the repair, that if something happened and my heart got into pain, there will be repair that I can do to myself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what you're making me realize is that we're walking into a future where we have to become way more intentional about how we're relating, who we're relating to, and the meaning that we attach to these relationships. Because even when you say to me, this relationship is meaningless, just whatever, actually, this is how I know it has the most deepest meaning in terms of your own evolution and your own transformation as a human being. Because we all go through these phases, and especially the phases that we think are meaningless, they're the ones who actually are the prelude to something very meaningful just to come.
So true. So true.
It's coming up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So
Inspiring.
yeah. So I feel
All
like
right.
our sultry and sacred questions are really flowing into that episode beautifully, and cannot wait to hear from our listeners the questions that they want us to ask each other as well, or answer for them.
So yes, please. I'd love that. There's just one more thing I wanted to add to what you said about plant medicine, because maybe we I don't know if our listeners are familiar with plant medicine or what it does. There's a lot of, it's one of those things that divides audiences. You know, people don't really know what plant medicine is and therefore make judgments based on what they think they know or rumors. But actually, plant medicine is, and please do talk to us more about it because you work with plant medicine too. But for me, plant medicine is really what shook the very foundations of my being in terms of vibrationally and energetically.
Yes.
It moved me from one place, from down there to up here, and I'm still, climbing. But it's, especially when you're at a point in your life where it feels like it's hopeless, there's nowhere to go. I've done everything I could possibly do in my capacity as a human being, in terms of therapy, in terms of working on myself and so on. I don't know what to do next. I don't know what. I'm stuck. Plant medicine is what unstucks you.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cleans you up in it like not not even just chemically. It's not. I don't. You tell me more about it because you are the.
We're going to talk about it definitely at some point into details. But yes, I totally agree. Therapy is beautiful and it helped me so much. But again, it was more process oriented in a way, or something that you need to go through. But at the end of the day, you come up with, okay, so I've done this, I've done that. I'm still anxious. What to do now? I've done everything. What to do now? So for me, as a person that used to have anxiety attacks and depressive episodes, it changed my life completely in those terms. So we definitely can talk more about it. It became more, my eyes have opened up to the empathy beyond therapy that therapy provides answers for, but it gives more of a lens of empathy towards the humanity behind why we do what we do, more than just logically.
Exactly. Some things need to be healed outside of the human experience.
Yeah.
It needs to heal more on a spiritual level.
Definitely.
Core spirituals, core soul level. And that's exactly what plant medicine does.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm excited to talk more about it with you in later. For sure. All right. So, I mean, there's still so much more to say about this topic.
Yes.
But we've run out of time.
When you call it, oh my God. But I think that we just scratched the surface of it all. It's actually like we will be we will be going back again and again to this and deeper.
Yes, but that was one hell of a ride. Thank you so much, Cinderella, for this wonderful discussion. It gave me more things to think about, even as a therapist. And we went from attachment theory to why do I catch feelings with sex real quick.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, we barely scratched the surface. Your attachment style doesn't just shape your relationship with love, but with sex too. And it addresses all your fantasies, your turns on, your fears, and we're going to get back to this at some point in our episodes as well in the future.
So tell us, just before we go, one sexual or romantic behavior you thought was normal until you realized it was actually just your attachment wounds acting up.
Mm.
You think your sex life is completely separate from your emotions. Spill the tea in the comments or send us your stories and we might just read them out in future episodes. And if you don't want your name mentioned, don't worry, which will be completely anonymous.
I love that. Yes. And if you love what we're doing, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your situationships or your girlfriends or your friends or your sisters and your moms, maybe your parents. And see you next time.
See you next time.